Hey, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. My name is Leah Bartos and I'm a staff advisor at Associated Students. Today's training session is Intercultural Awareness and Communication Strategies, which will be facilitated by Madison, who is an international student advisor at the OISS. In our audience today, we have student leadership from our boards, commissions, and units, as well as executive officers and senators. We encourage you to please make the most of this learning opportunity and participate as much as you are able. While engaging in this work, please do so with respect and sensitivity for one another and for the topic at hand. Please take care of yourselves during this session and take a break or space if you need it. And just a few speaking agreements to help facilitate the conversation today. Please use the raise hand function if you have a question. This will help to reduce interruptions as well as allow anyone who wants to share to be heard. And approach this topic with an open-mindedness and curiosity. And also, please be mindful of each other's privacy. So we want you to take away lessons learned here and share what you learn, but keep personal details of someone else's story private. One last bit of housekeeping, please note that this session is being recorded and will be posted online. However, we don't want the recording to be a barrier for participation for anyone. So if you have a concern with that, please do send us an email after the session and we can address the concern. And finally, there will be a checkout form posted in the chat at the end of the session. And so in order to get the credit for attending the session, you'll need to do the form. So keep an eye on the chat for that. And with that, I will turn it over to Madison.
Great. Thank you so much, Leah. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you, Leah, so much for the invitation for our office to participate. There are two students who will be presenting with me, and we'll do introductions in a couple slides. So I just want to start by sharing my screen so that I can show you all our presentation. Okay, so you should be viewing it now. The title of our training is Intercultural Awareness and Communication Strategies. The content of our presentation was adapted from Dr. Rob Davis over at UC Davis. He did give us permission to sort of take some of his content and adjust it to fit our needs for this training. So we do thank Dr. Davis. And our first slide, your presenters will be Peter, Charles, and myself. So I think I'll let Peter introduce himself first, then Charles, and then I will go third.
Hey guys, my name is Peter, and my pronouns is he, him, his. I'm the current chair of ASGGC, and I'm also previously the Vice President of Chinese Students and Scholars Association. And nice to see you guys.
Hi everyone. Some might be a little surprised to see me. I am an alumni, but I'm Charles, the former chair of the Global Gacha Commission. My pronouns are he and his, and I was born and raised in San Diego, but I am also a dual citizen of the United States and Japan.
Thank you both. And my name is Madison Motoyasu. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm an international student advisor in the Office of International Students and Scholars, also known as OISS. And I want to thank Peter and Charles for co-presenting this training today. Our office works pretty closely with the Global Gaucho Commission, and so thank you, Peter and Charles. You two are immensely helpful and such a great resource for our department. Our overview consists of 5 main sections, and we've already gotten through 2. So we're breezing through. The first was the speaking agreement. Thank you for doing that. The second, the introductions, we already hit those. The third section we're about to move into is the theoretical framework for understanding culture. And then the fourth section will be the student perspectives and communication tips, which will be presented by Peter and Charles. And the last portion will leave some time for a Q&A. During this training, you'll hear from an international student being Peter and a domestic student being Charles. By the end of this training, we hope you have a better understanding of cultural dimensions and leave with some tools to help you all understand and respect each other's cultures. So this is our first discussion point. I would love for you all to unmute yourselves and just, I think she said use the raise hand function. But the question is, when you hear the word culture, what do you think of? I'm not sure exactly where I would see who's raising their hand.
Should be right on the participant list. If you open up that, if you click on participants, it'll be above the chat.
Okay, I only see the screen sharing portion right now.
Okay, can you, maybe if you minimize that screen to make it so it's not your full screen? Alternately too, if you can't see the chat, people could type in the chat. If they have a question, they can just say, I have a question, or if they want to comment, if folks want to answer your question via chat, if that's okay.
Sure. Oh, actually, I just found the participant list up at the top. I see it. And it doesn't look to me like anyone's raising their hand though. Kai, Romina, go for it.
Yes. So I would just define culture as like the knowledge and language, religion, the food, just like the habits and the arts of like of a particular group. That's my definition.
Great. Thank you. So you said language, culture, arts, habits of a specific group. Perfect. Does anyone else want to share their understanding of the word? Okay, we will breeze right along then. I'll resume sharing. Okay, so I've provided a sort of more official, I suppose, definition. There are many definitions of culture, but this is just one from Spencer and OT. You can read through it. The portion that I highlighted, which is actually what somebody, Kyromina, just said, beliefs, assumptions, policies, your orientations to life, things that are shared by a group of people. They influence but do not determine each member's behavior and their interpretations of the meaning of other people's behavior. So pretty straightforward. That's the general definition we're going to be working with today. This is the cultural iceberg. So surface culture versus deep culture is what it's meant to represent. So the tip of the iceberg, which are things that you can more easily see, like food, dancing, games, literature. That would be the little tip part. And then the deeper culture, as you can see, these are things that might be more below the surface, not as easily visible. So the categories are like communication styles and rules, like body language or gestures and eye contact. And then at the bottom, there's your approach to marriage and decision-making or raising children. So this is a good representation of another layer through which we can understand culture. And then more ways we can think about culture is culture specific or culture general. So the first one refers to particular characteristics belonging to members of a certain culture. It's focused on the individual, but still acknowledging that not every single individual will be exactly the same within the same culture. And then the second way of thinking about culture is culture general. And this knowledge is concerned with dimensions or frameworks that can be used to describe and compare all cultures. a few identifiable dimensions on how they communicate or show emotion or relate to time. So this alludes a little bit more to that lower part of the cultural iceberg, and it's a way of zooming out to view and understand culture. While specific culture knowledge may help you understand one specific culture better, the culture general knowledge will help you understand and relate more deeply to cultural differences. You can compare and contrast several cultures at the same time as you encounter them. So an example of a culture-specific way of thinking might be, let's say I'm visiting a country I've never been to, and I observe, wow, the cars are all driving really fast. So I'm acknowledging there are specific members in this culture who drive like 90 miles an hour, let's say, for example. Whereas if I were to zoom out and try to think more culture generally, I might wonder, what are all these people's relationship with time? And what does time mean to them in this sense? And why are they driving so fast? And what are other ways that I can understand this relationship to time? And even then compare that to my home culture or a different culture that I may have observed. So that's just one example. And this is I think his name is pronounced Geert Hofstede. Don't quote me on that though, but he is very well known for the cultural dimension. Some of you may be familiar with it, but there are 6 that consist of this model. And the model of its national culture consists of these 6 dimensions, which represent independent preferences for one state of affairs over another that distinguish countries rather than individuals from each other. So this is a more culture general way of understanding. So if we look at one example in particular, the green hexagon with individualism versus collectivism, I'll give you the definition for that, which is individualism can be defined as a preference for a tightly knit social framework in which individuals are expected to take care of only themselves and their immediate families. In opposite, collectivism represents a preference for a tightly knit framework in a society where individuals can expect their relatives or members of a particular in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. A society's position on this dimension is reflected in whether people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. So for countries that score higher in the individualism dimension tend to value the I more so than the we. So I as a person is more important than the us, that is our whole country. An example that I am thinking of is happening right now. So I'll describe it and then see if anyone can guess what I am referring to. So there's something that US citizens can do, which health officials have recommended would benefit the greater good and potentially overall health of the nation, right? However, and there are many people who do this one thing. However, there are also many people who either don't want to do this one thing or they refuse to because they feel it infringes upon their individual rights. And so when they don't want to do this one thing because they may be prioritizing the I and my rights over what could potentially be the collective good for us, health speaking. Can anyone guess what I might be referring to, what this thing is that I'm thinking of. I guess you can raise your hand. Oh, just kidding. Everybody put it in the chat already. Yes, that is exactly what I was thinking of and describing, wearing a mask during a pandemic. I'd love to hear from others if either you think that's totally off base or wrong, or if you have a different idea that you would want to share, or a different example of the individualism versus collectivism dimension. And you can raise your hand. I'll try to pull it up. Raise your hand if you would like to shout out your example. Oh, somebody put it in the chat also. It says getting vaccinated. Yeah, so I would say that might also be an example of where, depending on one's beliefs, if you feel vaccines would be helpful not only for yourself, but also, the greater good of the country for all of us, then you might get vaccinated, or you and your family might get vaccinated. Whereas if you don't feel it would be helpful to the general society, or you think it might be detrimental to your own personal health, something like that, then totally, you might not get vaccinated. You might not choose for your family to get a vaccine. Yeah, that's a good example. Okay, we will blaze on ahead. So, sorry, let me go back one. So if you scan the QR code that's on this screen with your phone, it will take you to their website. And there's actually, I think it's called the Country Comparer or something like that, where you can look for their search engine, type in the name of a country, and then it will show you where the country falls in all of these dimensions and what all of their scores are. So it's a cool tool to check out, or if later you just want to learn more about all the other dimensions because we only talked about one, then you're welcome to do so. I chose this graphic from their website because it has the side-by-side comparisons of 4 countries, which are Brazil, China, Germany, and the US. So if we look at the individualism dimension, which is what we were just talking about, you can see the US score is really high. The scale is 0 to 100. So the US is nearly at the top. Whereas other countries, or a different country like China, scores 20, so less individualist, more collectivist. And then Brazil also is on the lower end of the individualism dimension. Some other interesting, and I think these are so fascinating, if you use that QR code and go and look up all of the definitions of what the dimensions are, it could be really eye-opening, because there are some things like the masculinity dimension, where at least these 4 countries are pretty close in comparison, whereas there are really, really big differences in other ones, like power distance, for example. 2 of the countries are pretty high, and then 2 are pretty low. And power difference refers to the sort of hierarchical structure of your society. So thinking about just your boss, for example, or people in roles that are perceived as higher than you, like the student-teacher relationship, the boss and employee relationship. How much power difference is there between the higher person and the lower person, and which countries are okay with there being a really large power difference, and which, like the US, are more quote-unquote democratic and want there to be less of a power difference, more shared power amongst more people rather than power just for a couple people. Oh, I went backwards. Okay, and my last slide introduces a 4-phase approach to intercultural learning. The first phase is about increasing awareness and understanding of our own characteristics and how we make meaning. The second phase is understanding other people's ways of making meaning. The third engages mindfully in contexts that disorient or challenge us. And then the fourth is about shifting your perspective, attuning emotions, and adapting behaviors appropriately. So I gave you tried to give you some tools that you could use for numbers 1 and 2. And then for numbers 3 and 4, I'll pass it to Peter and Charles, who will share their perspectives and then give you all some communication tips as well. So Peter, if you want to just speak, I can manage your slides for you.
Yes, of course. Okay, so I will share you guys with some perspectives as an international student. And so firstly, as a language learner, some of them may speak broken English and they could even be nervous or shy when speaking. So firstly, I want to apologize if you sometimes cannot understand what I'm saying. And also due to their culture, they may be not that talkative, especially when they are talking to some people they are not familiar with. It could be sometimes a challenge for them. And also for me as the chair of Global Gauge Commission, I'm not saying I'm unfamiliar with my teammate, but I'm just saying that you know, when we are conducting a meeting, I'll prefer to be the one to like listen to what other people say, and then I would just think in mind, and then just briefly share my opinions or suggestions. And also due to the culture, they may just behave differently, like how they solve a problem, how they interact with others, and their sense of values. They could be different, and also they may not know your culture, like how you guys use slangs, how you conduct small talks, your NorCal or SoCal accent. And yeah, that could be also a challenge for them. But how to say, definitely there are some differences, but I think there are just more things, like more similarities. For example, we all have those kind of emotional feelings. We all feel shy, we feel nervous, we feel happy, cheerful, those kind of emotional feelings. And also, I know there are some stereotypes, like people say that international students are rich, but the fact is that we still have some of them, they do part-time job to support their education. Some of them even just stay in the US for the whole 4 year of their college life just to save money and to support their education. And also some other stereotypes can be, some people say they feel awkward to interact with international students. Definitely there are some factors like their language or their culture, but I just want to say that a question I want to ask is, like, do you also feel awkward? Like, have you ever feel awkward to interact with the domestic students? Like, I think it will also be a personality issues, because like we all have like those kinds of, isolated people in our community. So, they are just feel more not that comfortable to interact with people. So yeah, so that's what I want to say. Charles, it's your turn.
So a lot of what I will talk about is based on what I have seen and what I have heard about when talking to other students, particularly other international students, as a domestic student, in terms of like how many domestic students in general, treat and view international students. So like, the first part is like in conversations and just approaches and just attitudes. There, like what I've noticed is that domestic students tend to kind of like set like preset like expectations on, how much like an international student is, like familiar or having like a culture and social understanding of VCSB, of Isla Vista, California, etc. And not understanding like that person's own cultural perspectives, and not considering at all like their own backgrounds as well. And in many cases, these expectations come from a very condescending point of view, which leads me to the next point, which among many domestic students there is a heavy assumption of negative and false stereotypes of international students based on cultural, racial, and political xenophobia and ignorance. Just to lay out some personal examples. One example that comes to mind was one time when I was still a student, I attended an academic feedback session at the global studies department, and one of the attendees used an opportunity to basically complain about international students and how they're making like everything much more difficult, and was basically said from a very derogatory and especially exaggerated viewpoint and examples. And in another example I have is actually of a housemate who was really talking about how from his point of view that international students are like arrogant, they don't care, they're disrespectful, and therefore, and he concluded like, oh yeah, they're not worth helping. And the sad part was that that housemate was actually of like the same ethnicity and cultural background as the international students he was talking about. So, and all of this just contributes to a lot of social separation between international and domestic students. And this is this is pretty obvious when you have them walking around on campus, and it just stems from just the stereotyping, xenophobia, ignorance, and finally indifference. Like just indifference. You're not interested in whatever. You're not interested in actually understanding someone's perspective. You're not interested in any sort of interaction. So I use it for you guys, the intolerance, ignorance, and indifference, in terms of like what contributes to all of this. And also, this isn't just an international student, domestic student kind of interaction thing. This happens a lot among domestic students of different ethnic and and cultural backgrounds as well. Like having a preset point of view of someone's culture, and how they act. So that's my part.
Yes, so here are just some tips I hope to give you guys and facilitate your work at AS or just help you during your everyday life. So the first one is just to be flexible. Just try your best to understand what they say and just use simple, clear language to let them understand what you say. And but it will depend on their language level, because some of them may have came to the US like for so many years, so they can understand your accent or slangs. But for some of them, they just came here like 1 year ago. It'll be a little bit harder for them. So just feel comfortable to ask them. Like you can ask like, does that make sense? Or or do you know what I mean? And things like this. You can ask them. And also just be a teacher. Like if you are confused about some concept, policies, or anything else in their daily life, you can just offer some help, just give them some explanation and help them to solve the confusions. And that will just facilitate your interaction with each other. And also just be open. Like most of them are new to the US when they are blending in the American culture. I think it'll also be a good idea for you guys to know more about their culture, because given the big trend of the globalization, probably you will also work with some like international colleagues, clients, or you will have some international friends in the future. It'll always be helpful for you guys to know about their culture beforehand, and also just be friendly. Like during the interaction, both you and the international student will feel more comfortable if you guys are just friendly to each other, and also be respectful. If there are any questions you want to point out or just add or ask, just let them know in a proper, polite way. And they are easygoing person. And also be the one to start the conversation. Like when you need to interact with international students, just say hi to them first. Sometimes if they keep silence, and also they are most likely to be happy and even released when you say hi to them. And when they find the conversation are not that challenging, they will feel more comfortable to talk. And yeah, and also there's one more point to add on what Charles said, because definitely I will say we do have some like what you guys called like bad international student, but we also have some international students. They are like really active and they are really social, and they become good friends with domestic students. And because it just do not have a like a preset impression on international student, because just do not give up to try. And you just do not know what's your like next experience will be like. Yeah, it will be a good relationship or friendship maybe. Yeah, that's it.
And I do want to plug in a good example as opposed to the bad examples I presented earlier. Like last year, when I first met Peter, we quickly became friends. And we always talk and maintain open conversation. And I can definitely say that for conversations with him, I have learned a lot. And not only in understanding about not only understanding international students, but the number of similarities between individuals, regardless of cultural and ethnic background. Because yeah, so I'm happy to say that through my friendship with Peter, and others as well, personally, I can say that I have learned a lot. And yeah, I just want to say that.
Me too. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Peter.
Great, thank you both. And I'll just add something that are examples that we hear from students oftentimes. They say, my group, when we have been remote instruction, my group asked what time zone or what time would work best for me, or my professor is offering class at this time as opposed to that time, so that I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. to go to class, and incorporating asynchronous learning, for example. Or sometimes students say in classes, the teacher might be like, so in that episode of insert common, I guess, US show, like Big Bang Theory, in that episode of Big Bang Theory when so-and-so does blah. Well, yeah, that's a perfect example of this dimension of culture. And our students feel like they missed the joke, or they're left out in a way because they don't have that cultural context. Maybe they've never seen or heard of Big Bang Theory. So things like that, where if you just have them in mind or sort of zoom out a little bit, it could be really helpful to some of our students. So our last portion we reserve for questions. So we're happy to hear any questions that you all have based on anything we touched on today. You could just raise your hand and then unmute yourself and let us know. Or if there's no questions, then that does it for us, Leah. Thank you again so much for having us. And thank you, Peter and Charles, for co-presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And if you'll just hold on for 1 second, I'll post the form for everyone.
Someone has a question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. I don't see the person with their hand raised.
Oh, I just.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm a grad student, and I'm really bad at raising hands because I didn't go through Zoom classes. But I'm curious how large the international student population is.
Sure, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Usually we kind of split the groups into two. So currently enrolled students is usually around 3,000. I think, or maybe it's like 3,500. And then we have another group who is, they've already graduated and they're working in the US on OPT, which is optional practical training. And that's the work authorization for international students on F1 visas to stay in the US and work after they graduate. So if we count currently enrolled and students who are on OPT, then it increases it by about 1,000, so maybe 4,500 total. And we count the OPT students because we are still serving them, and we still need to help them manage their CVIS records and maintain their status and things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys so much for being open and transparent. Like, sharing your story in front of a crowd can be hard. And, you know, as a grad student, my perspective is a little different, right? Like, I have a cohort of like 10 people, right? So like 10 people are in my program in my grade. So like,
Oh, wow.
There's just a lot more hanging out, you know, but I'm really sorry there's those divisions. And yeah, I think I can carry this with me into like Coastal Fund, where I'm a board member, and I can carry this with me into my own work within my program. But I just really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear it was helpful. So I see another question in the chat. I had wondered, for the graphic you showed earlier, what was the dimension of masculinity on the metric? Oh, sure. So countries who score higher in the masculinity dimension are, like, the rhetoric surrounding that is like, I can do this myself. I don't need any help. I'm gonna get there all on my own. Whereas the quote unquote femininity side of the dimension is more like help seeking, and it's okay to express how you're feeling, and like that sort of well-being is more important than the success, which is, of course, obviously, like, for obvious reasons, very problematic that one's considered masculine and feminine, but that's another topic. That could be our, you know, critique for the researchers, our recommendation. But good question, thanks.
Hi, I don't know if you guys could hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, hi. I also want to say thank you for being here and presenting. I had a question more about, because I'm taking this call on my phone, and like dialing in, so it's like on my, like I'm actually having a phone call. I was just wondering if anybody knew how I would be able to complete the survey saying that I was here, if it's if there's nothing on the screen.
I can help you with that.
I don't know if I should like email somebody else.
Yeah,
Okay.
can you see the chat? If I type into the chat, I can send you the email address of the person you need to contact. Would that work for you?
The thing is, it's like a phone call, so there is like no chat for me.
Okay.
Unless
okay.
if I'm doing something.
Okay, sorry, this is a Zoom challenge I haven't quite experienced yet. I can just, if you have a pen and paper, I can just tell you what the email address is and you can write it down.
Okay, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, it's
Give me a
Holly.
second.
Okay.
Okay, go for it.
It's Holly M. So HOLLYM. M as in, yeah, Holly Mays is what it stands for, at as.ucsb.edu. And you can look her up on the AS staff website, just as.ucsb.edu, and you can find all of our contact information that way. But if you just send her an email and let her know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's, and what's your name?
My name's Monica Sasunian.
Okay, perfect. I'll let her know to look out for an email from you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. And please, if anyone else has any issues accessing the form, send an email to Holly, and we can get that going.
Hi, I just wanted to say thanks also. My name's Emma. I'm from KCSB and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And we're we have a training program to get onto the FM station called K-Juice. And it's something that we're trying to get international student interaction with, because you can do it from anywhere. And this was just really helpful for me because I hadn't thought of stuff like keeping in time, like time zones and that kind of a thing, and just making sure it's all like equally accessible. So this was really helpful. And yeah, if you guys have any ideas or suggestions or want to like collaborate with KCSB, I feel like it'd be cool if we maybe if I could meet with someone to like talk about the training program and see if there are any other suggestions. That would be really great.
Yes,
Sure.
of course.
And Emma, what's your last name?
It's Meshes. I can put it in the chat.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, thank you so much, and thanks for sharing that. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having this training. I hope everyone has a nice day. Bye.
Thanks. Okay.
I see one more hand for Annie.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question, just like in general about interacting with international students. So if you're having a conversation with an international student and they are having trouble communicating with something, would it be better for you to try and like guess what they're saying for that, or would it be better for you to just like wait it out and see if they can completely like complete their sentence?
Yes, I think I can answer this question because it's always happened. So I think my suggestion is just like if you, like when I was interacting with Charles, if he cannot understand what I'm saying, he will just ask me to like, can you explain that a little bit more, or just, what do you mean? And just let them know that you cannot understand. And like, you can also ask like, you can also let them know what you are like, you can also let them know how you understand what they are saying, like how you interpret what they are saying, and just to double check with them. Yeah, and also make sure, and just, you should feel comfortable about that, because I know it'll be awkward sometimes if you cannot really understand each other. But I mean, that's a process, and once you go through that process, and you'll feel better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Annie, sometimes when I'm advising students, like, for example, you know, there's so many acronyms or so many departments on campus. If the student is telling me, I received an email from, you know, that place that has to do with conduct or something like that, then the first time that it happens, I might suggest, oh, are you referring to the Office of Student Conduct? And then, and that might be totally wrong, and then they can tell me, no, it's something else. But once they do that the first time, then I'll ask, so I was just trying to help. And if that happens again, would you prefer that I not try to help in that way, or do you want me to try to chime in for the rest of the appointment? So I'll go ahead and do it once, but then ask them if that's something they appreciated or if they would prefer I didn't do that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Great question, thank you. Okay, I don't think I see any more hands. Great, well, thank you again, everyone, for participating in our training. Charles and Peter worked really hard on it, and there would be no training to give if no one wanted to do the training. So thank you to our participants as well. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week.